Thank you very much. I will indicate there is a vote going on. I will be stepping away to vote. Hopefully, our members who are here have already done that, and we have members that are left. I'm going to leave the gavel in Senator Boozman's hands, and I told him I would be watching him, though. But I
get a little bit of responsibility here.
That's right. So I'm going to, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being here. But I apologize. I need to step away. Thank you.
Senator Bennet.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been waiting to be called on all morning, and obviously it was new leadership that was required in the committee in order to be called on. So thank you. I'm grateful for that. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for being here today. You know, one curiosity I have, and a thing that's given me pause, is just thinking about why FTX would have lobbied so hard for a bill that it could never comply with. Do you have any insight into that at all?
Senator, I've thought about
I'm sure you've thought about
I've thought about that myself, and you kind of hit the nail on the head, right? Because I can't speak to what Mr. Bankman-Fried or anyone at FTX was thinking when they were advocating for regulation. But the remarkable thing is to think about it in the context of compliance, right? And what we've learned about the FTX entities, and just thinking about the bill that Senator Stabenow and Boozman introduced, they would have been so far out of compliance that it wouldn't have even been possible.
I was happy to hear you say earlier to Senator Grassley that you thought in the wake of what's just happened that we need to keep an open mind about what this legislation ultimately is going to look like. And you've already suggested a couple of provisions that you think we ought to add. I think probably everybody on the committee would share that view. I hope that they would, and the need to act urgently at the same time. One of the things that worries me is we have to regulate here. We have to do it. One of the things that worries me is that we might inadvertently be giving the seal of approval to you described it as validation to Senator Thune, but the seal of approval to a global enterprise that we don't know enough about to say to Colorado's teachers and firefighters, this is stuff you should invest your pension money in. I mean, can you talk about some of the risks here? You said that you would err on the side of accountability and err on the side of consumer protection. I think that's the right impulse to have. It doesn't make it any less complex, the balance.
No, it doesn't. And when I have had these conversations with my colleagues in the regulatory space about, what does this mean in terms of systemic risk? What does it mean? We've been now through two major crises, if you think about the spring and Terra Luna and now FTX, and the traditional banking, the regulated banking system is safe. There's been
no contagion.
No contagion, no even market resiliency issues. So let's keep it that way. Why would we even dabble in the idea of changing? And what I always come back to is, especially since 2008 after the crisis, we've been through a lot of bumps in the past 2 years with COVID and then the Russia-Ukraine war and the impact on volatility in commodity markets and markets generally. Our regulations work. They work very well. Our markets are resilient. And the improvements we made after 2008 are very impactful and effective. And my thought process is, yes, I understand that there's been no contagion, but I have to think about that risk to customers and this idea that gaps exist and that future crises might happen, and I can't just sit back and not do anything. But I always lean back on the fact that our regulations work. So if we did bring this into the regulatory fold, then what are we essentially accomplishing? We're eliminating that probability of these FTX type implosions occurring. So
how do we eliminate or prevent contagion from happening as a result of one of these? I'm not arguing that there shouldn't be regulation. I'm arguing that we need to do it in as intelligent a way as we possibly can.
We eliminate contagion by applying the same principles of financial regulation that we apply to traditional finance to the digital asset.
So let me ask you about that. In this, I'm not an expert in digital assets, but if there were not an existing regulatory structure here, if we didn't have an SEC and we didn't have a CFTC, why would it make sense to lodge the responsibility to regulate, to make these determinations about whether it's a security or commodity and all the other determinations you were just talking about with Senator Hoeven in two agencies versus one, and are there bad things that could happen as a result of having that disparate oversight?
So, we have very different missions. The SEC is a capital formation and investor disclosure-based agency. We are a risk management and price discovery agency. One thing that I've been very cognizant of since becoming chair, and I was commissioner since 2017, but there's this debate about the two market regulators is not new. It's been going on, in this body for years. But standing alone, as I have conversations with my colleagues across the globe, the CFTC and the SEC are two of the largest regulators and regulate the largest markets in the world by far. So standing alone, we're immensely impactful and have huge remits, far greater than most any other regulator in the world. So it's for those reasons, I think, where it's effectively separate and each agency accomplishes its goals. To your point about do we miss anything, I would just point to the markets we oversee. This issue about securities versus commodities really first came up in the early 80s with futures products. There are security futures and there are commodity futures. Bulk of them are commodity futures, but there's security futures. And this came up after the financial crisis, security-based swaps and commodity swaps. And we have done, the two agencies, a very comprehensive job in filling all the gaps. There are essentially no gaps. And I feel very confident today telling you that we can do the same thing in the digital asset space.
And just with the last 40 seconds I have, can you please, you've said it already today once or twice, define the gap for us as you understand it.
So there is, based on the SEC statement, authority to regulate security tokens. The CFTC, the authority stops right now at derivatives markets. We only regulate financial products whose price is based on an underlying commodity. So the gap that exists is what's called cash commodity digital tokens. The Securities and Exchange Commission does not have authority to regulate or oversee any commodity, and we, the CFTC, do not have any authority to regulate cash commodity markets.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.